The grand chamber of the Selvari Galactic Tribunal was an architectural marvel, floating in deep space like a silent executioner. Towering columns of shimmering crystal lined the walls, each engraved with the ancient laws of the Selvari Empire. Above, a vast dome displayed a live feed of Earth, a small blue dot in the void, unaware that its fate was being decided at this very moment. Captain Jonas Mercer stood at the center of the chamber, his expression carefully neutral. He wasn't a soldier, not anymore. He wasn't a lawyer either, though he had spent the last year drowning in the nightmare that was Selvari legalese. No, he was something worse, a desperate man willing to bend the unbendable to save his people. The Selvari High Tribunal sat in judgment before him, their tall, thin forms draped in ceremonial robes woven with living circuitry. At the center sat Chief Arbitrator Velkoth, his translucent blue eyes gleaming with the certainty of victory. A holoscreen flickered to life in front of Jonas, displaying a 5,000-page legal document that pulsed with ominous red markers. The case of Earth's economic delinquency is now concluded, Velkoth announced, his voice a perfect blend of authority and amusement. As per Section 974, Subclause 88 of the Galactic Trade Compact, your species has defaulted on its debt to the Empire. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Jonas knew exactly where this was going. The penalty for such a failure, Velkoth continued, is immediate annexation. Earth shall become a designated labor colony, its resources and citizens absorbed into the Selvari Empire. Your kind will serve with gratitude. This ruling is final. Jonas exhaled slowly. He had prepared for this moment, but now that it was happening, the sheer weight of it pressed down on him like gravity itself. Billions of people, their futures rewritten with a few words in an alien courtroom. The Selvari thought this was over. They thought humans were just another primitive species to be crushed beneath bureaucracy. They were wrong. Jonas allowed a small smile to form on his lips as he scanned the contract once more, his eyes flicking over the archaic phrasing, the endless clauses, the hidden contradictions. He had spent months learning the Selvari's most powerful weapon, their own bureaucracy. A flick of his fingers, and the holoscreen expanded. He dragged his hand across the air, zooming in on a specific line, highlighting it in golden light. Actually, Jonas said, his voice deceptively calm, there's been an error in your ruling. Silence. Velkoth narrowed his gaze. An error. Jonas tapped the glowing text. According to Article 112, Clause 7 of the Galactic Judiciary Code, no species can be annexed without an official arbitration hearing. Since this is a tribunal, not an arbitration, your ruling is premature. Velkoth's lip curled. That clause was written over 300 years ago and has never been invoked. Jonas folded his arms. Does that make it invalid? Another murmur swept the chamber. The Selvari prided themselves on their legal perfection. If they ignored their own laws, they would undermine their entire system. Velkoth's fingers twitched slightly. Very well, he conceded. A formal arbitration will be granted. Jonas suppressed a smirk. Step 1 was complete. A side door hissed open, and a group of floating AI arbitrators entered the chamber. Their metallic bodies gleamed under the tribunal's artificial lights, their mechanical voices overlapping as they scanned the case. New petition accepted. Reviewing legal framework. Loading precedents. Lines of text cascaded down the holoscreen, filling the chamber with an eerie blue glow. Jonas knew what was coming next. That Selvari weren't just going to let him walk out of here with a victory. They had contingencies for everything. One of the AI arbitrators suddenly flashed red. Additional clauses detected. According to Annex Code 395, Emergency Subclause 5, arbitration may be overridden if a species has failed to meet its financial obligations for more than 50 cycles. Velkoth leaned forward, a cruel smile forming on his lips. You've just triggered the emergency override clause. That means the annexation ruling stands. Jonas clenched his jaw. They had laid a trap, a bureaucratic dead end that no species had ever escaped before. The Xelvari used legal loopholes as weapons, and right now, they had humanity's neck beneath their boot. He had seconds to respond. Think, Jonas. Think. Then, like a crack in stone, an idea formed in his mind. Interesting, Jonas mused aloud. But you've overlooked something. Velkoth's smile faltered. What? Jonas zoomed out on the contract and highlighted another passage buried deep within the text. According to Treaty Code 227, Section 14, any species under an arbitration ruling may issue a counterclaim of unfair legal process, which would necessitate a bureaucratic duel between the plaintiff and the defendant. Velkoth froze. The chamber went completely silent. Jonas tilted his head slightly, watching the realization dawn on the Xelvari judges. They had never imagined a human could decode their archaic legal system so quickly. You wouldn't dare invoke the bureaucratic duel, Velkoth growled. Jonas gave him a slow, confident smile. Oh, I absolutely would. The bureaucratic duel was an ancient relic of Xelvari law, a verbal battle of logic, contradiction, and linguistic traps. The first one to make a legal contradiction would lose. It was a contest of absolute precision, memory, and strategic manipulation. And humans were built for this kind of war. Velkoth's hands clenched. You're playing with forces beyond your understanding. Jonas took a step forward, his eyes locking onto the alien judge. No, you Xelvari have spent centuries perfecting the art of legal warfare, thinking no species could match you. But there's something you never considered. A pause. Jonas leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough for it to be dangerously confident. Humans are the most adaptable, manipulative, and bureaucratically insane species you've ever encountered. We have lawyers who can argue whether water is wet. We have entire governments that take decades to pass a single bill. And we have something you don't. Velkoth narrowed his gaze. And what is that? Jonas smirked. Sarcasm. The chamber exploded into chaos. The AI arbitrators flashed warnings, Xelvari judges murmured in confusion, and Velkoth's perfect composure cracked for the first time. Jonas took a deep breath. The bureaucratic duel was set. It was humanity's last chance, and he was going to win. The chamber remained tense, the air thick with the weight of what had just happened. No one had dared challenge the Xelvari's legal system like this before. A human had just invoked the bureaucratic duel, a contest so rare and so dangerous that most species didn't even know it existed. Jonas Mercer stood tall, suppressing the rapid beating of his heart. He had expected pushback, but the sheer shock on the faces of the Xelvari judges told him that he had hit them where it hurt the most. Velkoth, the chief arbitrator, regained his composure, though his pale blue skin had darkened in a way that Jonas assumed meant rage or discomfort. His long fingers tapped the edge of his throne-like chair, and for the first time, he seemed to be considering Jonas not as a doomed creature, but as an actual opponent. Very well, Velkoth said slowly, his voice laced with restrained fury. The bureaucratic duel is recognized. As per galactic law, the contest will begin immediately. A metallic clang echoed through the chamber as two massive stone pillars rose from the floor. Glowing runes spiraled along their surfaces, ancient and ominous, pulsing like they were alive. Between them, a thin veil of shimmering light appeared, creating a holographic battlefield of text and code, each line shifting in real time. Jonas took a careful breath. He was stepping onto the most dangerous battlefield in the galaxy, where wars weren't fought with weapons, but with words, contradictions, and loopholes. This wasn't just about finding a way to win. It was about not making a single mistake. Velkoth leaned forward. The rules are simple. You will challenge the legitimacy of our claim, and we will defend it. If either side makes a logical contradiction, they lose. If you make a single mistake, human, Earth is ours. Jonas didn't respond immediately. He let the words sink in. Then he stepped forward into the field of shifting laws. A cold voice of the tribunal AI filled the chamber. Bureaucratic duel initiated. All parties, present your arguments. Velkoff wasted no time. With a flick of his wrist, a glowing document materialized, thousands of lines long, cascading in rapid succession. Jonas immediately recognized the tactic. It was called the drowning maneuver. By overwhelming an opponent with sheer information, they could be forced into a mistake before they even began. Velkoff smiled. I present the Galactic Debt Accrual Act, signed into law over 1,000 years ago. As stated in Section 49, any species that benefits from trade under Selvari jurisdiction is considered under obligation. Earth has done so for decades. Jonas scanned the shifting document, his mind racing. They were starting strong. If he didn't counter fast enough, they would lock him into an irreversible position. He lifted his hand, pausing the flood of text, and focused on a single sentence buried in the depths of the document. But according to Clause 318, exceptions exist for emerging civilizations with no formal ambassadorial status at the time of trade agreements. Humans only gained official recognition in the Galactic Senate last year. The AI paused. The chamber filled with tense silence. A flicker of hesitation passed over Velkoff's face. He hadn't expected Jonas to find a counter so quickly. Jonas pressed the advantage. Since Earth had no formal ambassadorial status, we could not have legally entered a trade agreement under the Accrual Act. Any contracts before recognition would be considered invalid. A pulse of blue light ran through the text field. The tribunal eye processed the contradiction. Argument validated. The debt claim is now under review. Jonas forced himself not to smirk. First blow landed. Velkoff's fingers tightened into a fist. He waved his hand again, and the entire document restructured itself, rearranging into a new attack vector. Then let's address the matter of precedent. There is a historical ruling, the Votari dispute, which established that post-recognition trade benefits still fall under previous obligations. Jonas clenched his jaw. They were shifting the battlefield faster than he anticipated. He needed to stall, buy himself time. He raised a hand. Objection. The Votari ruling was made under the old judiciary system before the Tribunal I was implemented. Per Galactic Reforms Act, any ruling before AI oversight is subject to reinterpretation. The Tribunal AI glowed. Processing. Precedent confirmed to be under outdated law. Argument validated. Jonas let out a slow breath. That was too close. Velkoff's composure cracked further. His legal assault had been blocked twice. Jonas could almost feel the frustration radiating from the Selvari judge. The alien took a deep breath, recalibrating. Then he changed tactics. If Earth claims to be exempt from trade obligations, then it must also reject all technological benefits gained through Selvari infrastructure. Under the Galactic Resource Allocation Treaty, Earth would then be required to forfeit all advancements derived from external trade, including access to interstellar travel. Jonas's heart skipped a beat. That was a trap. If he accepted, humanity would lose everything it had gained since first contact with the wider galaxy. If he rejected, it meant Earth acknowledged its debt. Jonas stared at the cascading text, mind racing. There had to be an out. Then he saw it. A tiny loophole buried in the Resource Allocation Treaty's footnotes. Jonas tapped the air, highlighting the text. Not quite. The treaty specifically mentions forfeiture of non-terrestrial acquisitions. However, the very first human ship capable of FTL travel was constructed on Earth. That means interstellar capability was domestically produced. The AI paused again. Velkoff's eyes widened just slightly. Jonas pressed on. Which means, according to your own treaty, Earth retains access to interstellar travel regardless of external trade. The AI pulsed blue once more. Argument validated. A stunned silence filled the chamber. Jonas's breath was steady, but his hands were clenched tight. That had been too close. One wrong move, one missed detail, and it would have been over. Velkoff's rage was no longer hidden. His face had darkened further, his fingers gripping the armrests of his chair. He had clearly expected this duel to be over by now. Jonas stared him down, forcing a smirk. You Selvari love your laws, but you seem to have forgotten something important. Velkoff's voice was like ice. And what is that? Jonas's smile widened. Humans don't just follow rules. We find ways to break them. The chamber erupted into chaos. The tribunal AI flickered erratically as it struggled to process the rapid counterarguments. The audience of various alien dignitaries whispered among themselves, shock evident in their reactions. Velkoff exhaled sharply, regaining his focus. But Jonas could see it now. Doubt had crept in. The duel was far from over, but something had changed. For the first time, that Selvari realized that they were fighting an opponent who could actually win. Jonas stood in the center of the bureaucratic battlefield, his mind racing. He had won 3 rounds, each argument landing like a precise strike against the Selvary's web of laws. The energy pulsing between the stone pillars flickered erratically, reacting to the unprecedented challenge. The alien judges in the audience whispered among themselves, their unease growing with every ruling in Jonas's favor. Velkoff, that Selvari chief arbitrator, was no longer as composed as before. The tension in his rigid posture, the slight twitch of his elongated fingers, he was frustrated. But Jonas knew better than to think he had won. Because this was too easy. The Selvari were ancient masters of bureaucracy, their legal structures crafted over centuries to be an unbreakable fortress. Yet here he was, punching holes through their defenses one by one. Something wasn't right. Velkoff exhaled slowly, then tilted his head in a strangely deliberate manner. His glowing red eyes locked onto Jonas with an unsettling sense of amusement. You are impressive, human, Velkoff admitted, his voice smooth again, the anger carefully hidden. Most species crumble under the weight of our laws. But you are different. Jonas didn't respond. He just waited. Velkoff smiled, a rare predatory expression. But let us see how you handle a true challenge. With a single gesture, the entire battlefield shifted. The glowing legal text, which had been structured in clear, organized lines, suddenly twisted into something chaotic. Documents merged, split, reformed. Laws from different centuries, overlapping clauses, contradictory rulings, all cascading into an incomprehensible storm of bureaucracy. The tribunal AI's voice became distorted. Processing. Processing error detected. Jonas's stomach tightened. The battlefield was no longer fair. Velkoff had triggered an administrative overload, flooding the system with so many legal entanglements that it would be impossible for a single mind to untangle them in real time. Jonas stepped forward, trying to isolate one section of text, but as soon as he did, it split into 5 more subclauses, each referencing another law that hadn't been introduced yet. It was a trap. Velkoff leaned back, his smile widening. Ah, I see the problem. It appears that our system is simply too complex for a primitive mind to handle. Perhaps it would be easier if you simply admitted defeat. Jonas clenched his fists. This was the real game. The Selvari didn't need a fair fight. They had created the laws. They could twist them however they wanted. And now he was drowning in it. The tribunal AI flickered again. Discrepancy detected. Conflicting legal rulings. Primary contestant at risk of procedural failure. Jonas took a slow breath. He couldn't panic. He had faced impossible situations before, back on Earth, when corporate sharks tried to bury him in paperwork, when entire lawsuits were designed just to waste his time until he gave up. He had beaten them then. He would beat them now. Velkoff's voice was smooth, almost amused. I will give you one opportunity, human. Withdraw from this duel. Your world will still be annexed, but we will ensure your species is treated fairly. Jonas exhaled. Then he looked up at Velkoff, and did something completely unexpected. He smiled. "Nice try," Jonas said, "but you made one mistake." Velkoth's amusement flickered. "Oh." Jonas reached into the chaos, his mind working faster than ever before. He didn't try to fix the mess. That would be impossible. Instead, he let the contradictions exist. And then he weaponized them. Jonas gestured toward a section of text that overlapped with itself. "According to this law, I am not authorized to contest the claim." Velkoth's eyes gleamed. "That is correct." Jonas pointed at another section. "But according to this conflicting ruling, I have already been recognized as a valid participant." Velkoth's expression froze. Jonas pressed forward. "And this law states that if a single contestant is simultaneously authorized and unauthorized, then the Tribunal I must default to a reconciliation protocol to restore order." The AI flickered rapidly. Processing. Validating legal contradiction. Initiating reconciliation protocol. A sudden pulse of light washed over the battlefield. The chaotic, unreadable mess of overlapping laws snapped back into order, resetting to its previous state. Jonas hadn't defeated the overload. He had forced the AI to fix it for him. Velkoth's fingers twitched. Jonas could see the exact moment he realized the trap had backfired. That Selvari had created a system so tangled in its own complexity that if someone knew how to push it the right way, it would collapse under its own weight. Jonas took a confident step forward. "Now let's get back to where we were." The Tribunal I's voice steadied. "Proceeding with standard bureaucratic dual procedures. Overload detected as external interference. Penalty assigned to the Selvari judiciary." Jonas saw it, the moment Velkoth realized he had lost ground. But he wasn't done yet. Velkoth's expression darkened, but then his lips curled into another cold smile. "You are more dangerous than I expected," he admitted. "But I wonder, what will you do when you realize that even if you win this duel, Earth was never meant to survive?" Jonas narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" Velkoth gestured slightly, and suddenly, a holographic display appeared behind him. The image was crystal clear. A massive Excelvari fleet loomed over Earth. Thousands of warships, fully armed. Jonas's heart stopped. The duel had never mattered. No matter what happened here, the invasion was already underway. Velkoth leaned forward. "You have fought well, human, but we are not merely conquerors of law." His voice was almost gentle. "We are conquerors, period." Jonas's mind raced. They had been playing him the whole time, making him focus on the duel, making him believe that winning this legal battle would save Earth. But the real plan had always been simple: distract him and invade. The chamber was silent. The watching alien dignitaries were expressionless. This wasn't unusual to them. This was how the Selvari worked. They toyed with their victims, let them believe they had a chance, only to crush them completely. Jonas exhaled, his hands tightening into fists. No, this wasn't over. If they thought humans would play by their rules, they had underestimated him. Because if Earth was already under attack, that meant one thing: Jonas no longer needed to play fair. Jonas took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm even as the holographic display of Earth's orbit showed the Selvari fleet preparing for full-scale invasion. Velkoth watched him with an infuriating smirk, arms folded, confident that this was checkmate. Jonas could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The duel had been a distraction. The Selvari were never planning to play fair. They just needed him focused on their bureaucratic nonsense long enough to ensure Earth had no time to react. For a second, doubt crept in. Had he wasted too much time? Had he let them lead him into this dead end? Then something clicked. The Selvari believed their system was perfect. They had spent centuries refining it, creating a bureaucratic nightmare so complex that no species could ever outmaneuver them. But that was their weakness. Because while the Selvari relied on absolute logic, strict protocols, and centuries-old legal codes, humans cheated. Jonas grinned. Velkoth's smirk faltered just a little. You find this amusing, human? Jonas let out a chuckle. Oh, I was just thinking about something. And what would that be? That for a species obsessed with control, Jonas said, you guys are really, really bad at improvising. Velkoth's eyes narrowed. Jonas turned to the tribunal eye. The towering construct of light and text hovered in the center of the chamber, still stabilizing itself after the legal overload. Jonas's voice was calm, but sharp. AI Arbiter, I have a procedural question. The AI flickered. Proceed. Jonas gestured toward the holographic display of Earth's orbit. According to Selvari intergalactic law, a bureaucratic duel is legally binding, correct? Correct. And the outcome of this duel determines the legitimacy of Selvari control over Earth. Correct. Jonas's grin widened. Then tell me, does its Selvari invasion fleet preparing for battle before the duel has concluded violate procedural neutrality? Velkoth's face froze. The AI hesitated. Analyzing. Cross-referencing Section 84, Subsection 12 of the Galactic Arbitration Treaty. Confirmed. Preemptive military action during an unresolved bureaucratic duel is a violation of procedural neutrality. Jonas spread his hands. Ha! Would you look at that? The chamber erupted into murmurs. Alien dignitaries exchanged glances, and a few of them looked distinctly uncomfortable. The Selvari were powerful, but they were also bound by their own system. If the AI officially recognized a violation, it could have serious consequences. Velkoth's fingers twitched. Jonas wasn't done. Arbiter, what are the standard penalties for such a violation? The AI flickered again. Per treaty regulations, an immediate ceasefire must be issued, and a formal inquiry into Selvari procedural misconduct must be initiated. Jonas leaned in. And who oversees that inquiry? A pause. Then, the Bureaucratic Tribunal. Velkoth's expression darkened. He had just lost control of the game. Jonas wasn't playing to win the duel anymore. He was playing to stall the invasion. Velkoth exhaled, his voice sharper now. You are grasping at straws. Even if the tribunal investigates, it will take years to process a ruling. Jonas shrugged. You're right. It probably would. Then he grinned. But you're forgetting one thing. Velkoth's eyes narrowed. Jonas turned to the AI. Per procedural law, if an active invasion is occurring before a duel is concluded, what is the fastest method of enforcing an immediate ceasefire? A flicker. Galactic Regulation 17b allows for an AI override order to prevent procedural contamination. Jonas snapped his fingers. Right. And who has the authority to request that override? The AI's glow intensified. Any primary participant in the duel. Jonas nodded. Awesome. Then I, Jonas Castillo, as the recognized primary contestant, formally request an AI override order to immediately halt all Selvari military operations against Earth. Silence. For a second, the chamber was completely still. Then the AI's core pulsed. Override request accepted. Processing. Processing. Confirmed. The holographic display of Earth's orbit shifted. Across the Selvari fleet, a sudden power disruption spread like wildfire. Weapons deactivated. Engines powered down. Targeting systems reset. Across hundreds of warships, control panels flickered as automated ceasefire commands locked every Selvari system in place. Velkoth shot to his feet. You can't. The AI cut him off. All military actions against Earth are now in forced suspension pending tribunal review. Any attempt to override this command will be classified as a direct violation of galactic law. Jonas couldn't help it. He laughed. Velkoth's eyes burned with fury. His perfect plan had just collapsed in real time, all because Jonas had found a loophole buried in their own bureaucracy. The alien dignitaries were whispering among themselves now. That Selvari's dominance relied on perception, on making sure everyone believed their control was absolute. But if word got out that a human had outmaneuvered them in their own game, That would be a disaster for their reputation. Jonas leaned back, arms crossed. So, about that invasion. Velkoff's jaw was clenched so tightly it looked painful. He had two choices: ignore the AI's ruling, override the ceasefire, and risk a full-scale galactic legal crisis. Accept the ruling, retreat, and let the world see that the mighty Xelvari had just been played by a human. Either way, Jonas had already won. Velkoff inhaled sharply. Then, with barely concealed rage, he turned away. This duel is not over, human. Jonas just smirked. Nope. But your invasion sure is. The Xelvari stormed out of the chamber. As soon as he was gone, Jonas let out a slow, relieved exhale. Earth was safe. For now. But he had just painted a massive target on his back. That Xelvari wouldn't forget this. And something told him that Velkoff wasn't done playing games. But that was fine. Because neither was Jonas. Jonas sat in the tribunal chamber, his fingers tapping against the cold metal table. He had expected Velkoff to take the defeat badly, but he hadn't expected what came next. A formal counterclaim. That Xelvari weren't giving up. Instead, they were escalating. Velkoff had used a legal loophole to appeal the duel's results, filing a procedural reclamation order that could override the AI's ruling, if it passed the tribunal's final review. Jonas had barely had time to celebrate before he was dragged back into the bureaucratic hellscape. A voice boomed across the chamber. The tribunal recognizes Velkoff, High Executor of the Xelvari Dominion. Present your claim. Velkoff stepped forward, his expression cool and composed, but Jonas could see the burning hatred in his eyes. He wasn't just here to win. He was here to bury Jonas. The human has exploited an obscure procedural loophole, Velkoff declared. However, per Section 312, Subclause 9 of the Intergalactic Bureaucratic Code, a ruling may be overturned if the contestant is found to have acted in bad faith. Jonas raised an eyebrow. Bad faith. You're calling me a cheater. Velkoff's smirk returned. The Xelvari Dominion asserts that the human's actions were deliberately deceptive, violating the spirit of the duel. Jonas whistled. Wow. That's rich. You do know what species you are, right? The tribunal eye flickered. Processing claim. A formal counterargument may be presented. Jonas stood. He had one shot to shut this down. All right, let's break this down. The Xelvari are accusing me of bad faith because I'd followed their own rules. And won. Velkoff's smile was razor-sharp. You manipulated a procedural technicality to trigger an eye override. That is not how the duel was meant to be conducted. Jonas exhaled through his nose. This was bad. The tribunal was filled with species who feared the Xelvari's power. If they sided with Velkoff, Earth's fate would be sealed. He needed to flip the narrative. All right, Jonas said, let's talk about intent. Because intent matters, right? The AI responded. Intent is a factor in determining procedural integrity. Jonas nodded. Good. Then let's look at Velkoff's intent. He wants to frame my move as bad faith. But the truth is, he never planned for this duel to be fair. He initiated it as a formality, a delaying tactic while his fleet prepared to attack Earth. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Jonas pressed on. So, if we're really judging intent, let's ask a simple question. Who actually acted in bad faith here? The guy who used the rules to prevent an invasion, or the guy who staged a duel just to distract from the fact that he was already invading? Velkoff's jaw tightened. Jonas turned to the AI. AI Arbiter, does filing a duel in bad faith constitute a violation of procedural integrity? A pause. Then, analyzing. Confirmed. If the initiating party is found to have acted in bad faith, all associated rulings and appeals may be invalidated. Velkoff's composure cracked for just a second. Jonas pushed harder. So if we're calling out bad faith, we have to start at the source. And if we do that, then this entire duel, this entire legal battle, is a fraud. Silence. Then the AI's glow pulsed. Reviewing procedural integrity claim. Processing. Processing. Determination reached. Jonas held his breath. That Selvari Dominion is found to have initiated the duel in bad faith. Their procedural reclamation order is invalid. The chamber erupted. Velkoth's fists clenched. His final gambit had just collapsed. Jonas leaned in slightly. So, what happens to a species that gets caught weaponizing bureaucracy for illegal military action? The AI's glow intensified. Per galactic sanction laws, a formal violation report must be submitted to the Intergalactic Diplomatic Council. Additionally, the Selvari Dominion is now subject to an official audit of all prior bureaucratic engagements. The moment the words audit and sanctions hit the air, Jonas saw something rare, true fear in Velkoth's eyes. That Selvari thrived on their bureaucratic superiority. If an audit uncovered even one more case of procedural misconduct, it could trigger massive diplomatic consequences. Jonas let the silence hang for a moment. Then he smiled. Velkoth, buddy, you ever hear the human phrase, play stupid games, win stupid prizes? Velkoth's voice was a low snarl. This isn't over. Jonas shrugged. No, but for now, it kinda is. The AI's voice boomed. Final ruling. That Selvari Dominion's procedural claim is nullified. All military actions against Earth remain in permanent suspension. This tribunal is now adjourned. Jonas let out a slow breath as the ruling locked in. It was over. Velkoth stormed out of the chamber, his cloak snapping behind him. The Selvari delegation followed, their normally smug expressions replaced with barely concealed panic. Jonas watched them go, then turned to the massive holographic display of Earth. They were safe. For now. But as he stepped away from the table, a thought nagged at the back of his mind. The Selvari had lost this battle. But would they really accept this defeat? Or was this just the beginning of something much, much bigger? Jonas stepped out of the tribunal chamber, the echoes of the AI's final ruling still ringing in his ears. The corridors of the massive galactic bureaucratic complex stretched endlessly in all directions, the cold metal walls humming with the low vibrations of processing systems handling thousands of cases at once. But right now, none of that mattered. Earth was safe. For now. As Jonas walked toward the docking bay, his communicator buzzed. He tapped the side of his earpiece, and the familiar voice of Captain Rourke crackled through. Jonas, Rourke said, barely containing his excitement. Tell me you pulled it off. Jonas exhaled a short laugh. Oh, I pulled it off. A cheer erupted from the other end. The bridge of the U.S. Dauntless was probably in chaos, officers celebrating the fact that the war they had been preparing for had just been canceled by nothing more than a legal technicality. Jonas boarded the small diplomatic shuttle waiting for him, the sleek, black craft humming to life as the autopilot system engaged. Through the viewport, he could see the tribunal station shrinking behind him. You wouldn't believe the meltdown Velkoth had, Jonas continued. I thought he was going to explode right there in the chamber. Rourke chuckled. I almost wish I could have seen that. So it's official. The Selvari can't make a move. Jonas leaned back in his seat, staring at the endless expanse of space outside. For now, he said. There was a pause. Rourke sighed. That's what I was afraid of. Because Jonas knew the truth. The Selvari weren't done. They had lost in the tribunal, but Velkoth wasn't the kind of leader to accept defeat lightly. Jonas had embarrassed him, publicly, permanently, and if there was one thing he knew about the Selvari, it was that they never forgot a slight. This was just a skirmish, Jonas admitted, a battle fought in legal clauses instead of lasers, but Velkoth is already looking for a way around it. Rourke's voice lowered. You think he'll come at us again? Jonas nodded to himself. Not if. When. That Selvari couldn't invade Earth directly anymore. Not without triggering massive sanctions and diplomatic blowback. But they had other ways. Proxy wars. Economic sabotage. Bribery. Assassinations. The game wasn't over. The board had just changed. Jonas knew it was only a matter of time before Velkoff found another angle, another loophole. His communicator buzzed again. This time, it was Admiral Whittaker. Jonas answered. Agent Matthews. Whittaker's voice was sharp as ever, but there was a hint of something else this time. Respect. Amusement. I just finished reviewing the tribunal's final ruling. I have to admit, I didn't think you'd pull it off. Jonas smirked. Neither did I. A chuckle from the Admiral. Regardless, you've bought us time. Earth owes you. Jonas sighed. Well, let's hope it lasts. There was a silence on the other end. Then, it won't, Whittaker said. Jonas closed his eyes. He had been hoping for a bit more optimism. We'll debrief when you're back, Whittaker continued. But be ready, Matthews. That Selvari aren't the only ones watching. You just proved that humans can play their game and win. That's going to make us enemies. Jonas knew that. The Galactic Council had always tolerated humans, but this changed things. A species that wasn't supposed to matter had just outmaneuvered one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. People would take notice, and not all of them would be friendly. As the shuttle streaked toward the U.S. Dauntless, Jonas leaned back, arms folded behind his head. He let himself enjoy the moment, just for a little while. Because soon enough, the next battle would begin.